My name is Eleanor Price, and I am 62 years old. For most of my adult life, I believed I had done everything right. I built a small accounting business from nothing, raised 2 daughters, and spent nearly 3 decades married to a man who believed himself to be a visionary. His name is Robert. Charming. Ambitious. Magnetic in the way people who can sell a dream often are. And for many years, I admired that about him. We lived in a sunny house on a quiet street lined with sycamores that rattled in the wind like restless bones. My mornings were slow, gentle rituals. A pot of Earl Grey. A crossword puzzle. The kind of peace a woman earns. I used to think I knew the shape of my life. But the truth is, we don't always realize the ground is shifting until we feel it break under our feet. In the early years of our marriage, money was tight. I worked 2 jobs. Robert tried 3 business ideas that all fizzled before they sparked. He'd laugh it off, tell me money didn't matter, that what mattered was belief. "You're the practical one, Ellie," he'd say, tapping the side of my head. "You keep us grounded. I'll keep us dreaming." I thought it was a partnership, logic and vision, hand in hand. But people change. Or maybe they don't change at all. Maybe they just reveal themselves slowly. When Robert finally launched a successful consulting firm in his 40s, I was proud of him. Proud of us. We had survived lean years and somehow built something that looked, from the outside at least, like stability. He traveled often. He schmoozed clients with a showman's ease. And he started insisting that money was just a tool, nothing to get emotional about. I used to smile at that. Because I knew exactly how hard I had worked for every dollar we had. I didn't know then that this philosophy, his casual dismissal of financial responsibility, would become the monster crouched under our marriage. Waiting. There were small signs at first. An unexplained charge here, a late payment there. When I'd ask, he'd brush it off. Cost of doing business. My accountant handled it. "It's nothing, Eleanor. You worry too much." After a lifetime in accounting, I knew that nothing was rarely nothing. But I let his reassurances calm me because I had loved him for so long, and love can be a powerful teacher of denial. In my 60s, I decided to semi-retire. I kept a few clients I'd had for decades, mostly because they felt like family and I liked staying sharp. But for the first time, I let myself imagine a slower life, gardening, traveling, a future where the only deadlines were sunsets. It felt like a reward. But retirement changes a marriage. You spend more time together. You see the cracks. You feel the tension between 2 people who have been running parallel for years and are suddenly expected to intersect. One evening, I noticed Robert pacing in the backyard, phone pressed to his ear, voice low but tense. When he came inside, he smiled too quickly. His eyes didn't match his mouth. I remember thinking it was the first time in years he'd looked afraid. But he said nothing. And I didn't press. If I had known that his company was wobbling, that his ego was cracking, that the man who preached, "money doesn't matter," was about to hinge his survival on me, I would have asked every question. I would have taken every precaution. But we never know the storm until we are standing in its rain. And my storm was about to begin. I didn't yet know that the next morning, Robert would sit across from me at the kitchen table, hands trembling, and ask for something that would change everything. The next morning, I woke to the sound of Robert brewing coffee. That alone felt like a warning. He never did that unless he was nervous. When I walked into the kitchen, he was sitting at the table with the French press untouched, staring at it as though it held an oracle's message. "Ellie," he said, and his voice cracked just enough to raise goosebumps along my arms. "We need to talk." Every woman over 50 knows that sentence. It could mean anything, from a heart attack to an affair to the end of a marriage. I sat down slowly, bracing. He inhaled sharply. "My company, it's in trouble." There it was. The truth, but only the surface of it. He explained it like a man reading from a script someone else had written. A major client had backed out. A contract he'd been counting on hadn't materialized. A loan had been called early. The phrases were all familiar, I'd heard them from clients in crisis for years. But the way he said them, like a child asking for help with a broken toy, unsettled me. I just need a bridge, he said. A temporary infusion. A loan. A loan? I repeated, feeling heat rise up my neck. He nodded. Eleanor, I wouldn't be asking if it weren't serious. How much? I asked, already fearing the answer. 250,000. The number hit me with physical force. My chest tightened. My vision hazed at the edges. That money was my retirement cushion. My security. My independence. It was the sigh of relief I had spent a lifetime preparing for. I whispered, Robert, that's everything I've saved. But it doesn't matter, he said quickly. Because this is temporary. I just need 60 days. 90, at most. Once the next contract lands, we're fine. You know I've always bounced back. I sat there, stunned into stillness. Part of me wanted to scream. Another part wanted to weep. But the accountant in me, the part he had relied on and taken for granted, knew better than to react emotionally. So I asked the only question that mattered. Show me the numbers. He froze. It was almost imperceptible, but I caught it. The flicker of panic. The microsecond of calculation. I don't have them on me, he lied. Yes, lied. I saw it in his eyes. Eyes I had known since I was 33. Eyes that had always betrayed him before his mouth did. Bring them to me, I said. All of them. Books, statements, contracts, liabilities. If you want my help, I need full transparency. He nodded too fast. Too eagerly. Of course. Absolutely. You'll see everything. But over the next week, he stalled. He forgot documents. He provided spreadsheets that were clearly edited. He left out bank statements entirely. And every time I pushed, he deflected. Every time I questioned, he minimized. Every time I insisted, he grew defensive. Why don't you trust me? He snapped one evening. I'm your husband, Ellie. This is marriage. We help each other. The irony scraped against my patience like sandpaper. When I had been the one struggling during our early years, he hadn't helped me. I had simply survived. I had built. I had saved. And now he wanted to raid the life raft I had spent decades stitching together. But the true betrayal didn't come until the 12th day, when an envelope arrived in our mailbox. A thick envelope. From the IRS. Addressed to him but delivered, by accident or fate, into my hands. I didn't open it immediately. Instead, I walked to the pantry, sat on the small stool inside, and breathed in the dark quiet for a full minute before tearing the seal. Inside were notices. Overdue taxes. Penalties. Warnings. Tens of thousands owed. Dated over the last 3 years. 3 years he had never mentioned. 3 years he had let debts accumulate while telling me money didn't matter. My pulse hammered in my ears. My hands shook. He hadn't been honest. Not once. Not about his company. Not about his finances. And certainly not about why he wanted my money. This wasn't a temporary crisis. It was a collapse. And he wanted me to fund the fallout. That night, as he slept, I opened his office door for the first time in years, and what I found on his computer confirmed everything I feared, and something far worse. I stood in the doorway of Robert's home office, my heart pounding like I was a teenager sneaking into forbidden territory. The room smelled faintly of cedar and printer ink. It had always been his space, his kingdom, as he once joked. And for years, I respected that boundary. But trust is a fragile thing. Once cracked, it demands examination. I approached his desk, turned on his computer, and prayed he hadn't changed his password. He hadn't. The desktop lit up, revealing folders and documents scattered in a kind of digital chaos. I opened his financial software first. The numbers were worse than I imagined. Not just a dip, not just a bad quarter, an unraveling. Loans stacked upon loans. Credit lines nearly maxed. Vendor invoices unpaid for months. Payroll borrowed against. It wasn't misfortune. It was mismanagement. Neglect. Pride. And then I found it, the spreadsheet titled Bridge Plan. It was the same name he'd used when asking for my money. But this version, this was the raw, unedited truth. I scrolled. Projected revenue, exaggerated. Outstanding debts, minimized. Personal withdrawals, hidden. My savings, listed under potential capital injection. He had listed me like an asset. A lifeline. A resource. Not a wife. Not a partner. A solution. I pushed away from the desk, breath trembling. My mind flicked back through our marriage, back through years of small comments I had brushed aside. You worry too much. You're too attached to your money. It's just numbers, Ellie. You need to loosen up. Words that had felt dismissive before now landed with poisonous clarity. Robert didn't see money the way I did because Robert had never had to survive the way I had. He came from comfort, from a family that bailed him out of trouble more times than he admitted. His childhood was soft, cushioned by parents who mistook indulgence for love. Mine was different. My father was a steelworker who died before he turned 50. My mother stretched grocery money like a magician. I learned early that security was not a right. It was something you built with sweat and humility. When I left for college on scholarships and part-time jobs, I swore I would never be financially vulnerable to anyone. Not a spouse. Not a system. Not luck. Robert had known that about me. Admired it. Praised it. Used it. And suddenly, I remembered all the times he told me, money doesn't matter. How lightly he'd said it. How earnestly. How he'd used it to justify risk-taking, impulse spending, grand gestures with money we didn't have. But now, when he needed cash, real money, my money mattered quite a lot. And the only thing stronger than betrayal is context. When you can see the entire arc of a person, not just their actions, but the history that shaped them, you understand motives with painful clarity. Robert's motive was simple: protect his ego at any cost. Even at the cost of our marriage. Even at the cost of my future. I sat in his office chair and let memory wash over me, our early years, when I worked late into the night to pay bills he didn't look at, when I filed taxes he didn't understand, when I opened savings accounts in my name because I knew I needed a safety net he didn't believe in. Now here he was, years later, reaching for that net as though it were always meant for him. My jaw tightened. But revenge, ethical revenge, is never impulsive. It's measured. Logical. Documented. I reached for a flash drive in the drawer. And I copied everything. Every spreadsheet. Every email. Every debt. Every lie. Because if Robert wanted to involve me in his sinking ship, he was about to learn something very important. I don't sink. I swim. And I take notes. What I discovered next, hidden not on his computer, but in a desk drawer, would transform my quiet anger into something far sharper, and far colder. The drawer was locked. That alone made it interesting. Robert wasn't a man who believed in privacy within marriage, at least not when it came to my privacy. He always felt entitled to my calendar, my spending, my time. But his drawer? Untouchable. I searched for the key with the calm patience of a woman who has raised children and rebuilt a life more than once. And eventually, tucked behind an old box of business cards, I found it. The drawer opened with a soft click. Inside were folders, thick ones, bulging with papers. The first contained unpaid invoices. I expected that. The second held loan agreements he had never disclosed. The third, bank statements for an account I had never heard of. The kind of account men open when they want to keep secrets. I unfolded the statements one by one, smoothing them out on the desk. Transfers. Withdrawals. Payments. At first, I thought the worst, that he was hiding personal spending, perhaps even an affair. But no. The spending wasn't romantic. It was desperate. Over 2 years, he had been funneling money into his company to keep it afloat. Quietly. Secretly. Recklessly. He had drained his retirement entirely. Sold investments. Cashed out his life insurance. And still, he had lost control. I sat with that knowledge for a long moment. Because betrayal is a complicated thing. It hurts more when you realize it grew from fear rather than malice. Robert wasn't trying to sabotage me. He was trying to hide his own unraveling. But intentions don't erase consequences. Eventually, I returned to the drawer and found something stranger, a manila envelope labeled personal. Inside were printed emails, conversations between Robert and a business partner I'd never heard of. A younger man named Cal. Their tone was frantic. They discussed buying time, stalling investors, avoiding disclosure, and, my stomach dropped, using Eleanor's liquidity. Liquidity. I had become a financial asset. Not a wife. Not even a person. A resource. But the last printed email chilled me. We need her on board, Rob. She's the only shot. Don't give her the details. Just get the money. Once we stabilize, she can relax. Get the money. Not ask. Get. My pulse thudded in my ears. But anger, when controlled, can be a strategist. I didn't shout. I didn't slam drawers. I didn't burst into our bedroom demanding answers. Instead, I gathered everything, emails, statements, contracts. I made digital copies and printed duplicates. I put the originals back, exactly as they had been. Then I began my own investigation. I created a timeline of his financial collapse. Cross-referenced every missing document. Compiled a list of accounts he had left out. Tracked every lie he had told me over the past month. This wasn't just a failing business. It was negligence masquerading as optimism. And he expected me to rescue it, to rescue him, without question. But the more I uncovered, the clearer it became, if I gave him my savings, they would vanish. His company would still fail. And I would be left scrambling in my 60s to rebuild what he had destroyed. I closed his office door behind me that night knowing something had shifted deep inside me. Not hatred. Not vindictiveness. Resolve. The kind of resolve that comes when a woman realizes she has nothing left to give someone who sees her only as a solution. The next morning, Robert made a mistake. He asked me again for the money, and this time, I was ready with questions he wasn't prepared to answer. He approached me while I was trimming rosemary in the garden. The irony wasn't lost on me, a man with no discipline interrupting a woman pruning carefully, cutting exactly what needed cutting. "Ellie," he said, voice too bright. "Can we talk?" I wiped my hands on my apron, faced him, and nodded for him to continue. "It's been 2 weeks. I really need that bridge loan. Time is running out." His urgency was real. His integrity was not. "I'll consider it," I said calmly, "after you answer a few questions." His smile faltered. "Of course. Why didn't you tell me about the overdue IRS notices?" His face drained of color. "You saw those?" "I did." He cleared his throat. "It's complicated. A misunderstanding. My accountant." "Your accountant didn't forget for 3 years," I said. "Next question. Why did you label me as a liquidity asset in communications with your partner?" He flinched. Literally flinched. "Ellie, listen." "I am listening," I said. And I'm curious why your bridge plan spreadsheet doesn't match the numbers you showed me. In fact, the real numbers indicate your company is insolvent. He blinked rapidly. You went through my files? You asked me for $250,000, I replied. You opened the door. His mouth worked soundlessly for a moment before he managed, You're treating me like an enemy. No, I said softly. I'm treating you like an adult. He inhaled sharply. This is marriage, Eleanor. You're supposed to support me. Support? I repeated. Or fund? His jaw tightened. You're overreacting. I just need time. And you think money buys time? It does. No, I said. Clarity buys time. Truth buys time. Discipline buys time. Money only delays consequences. He stepped closer, lowering his voice. Ellie, if the company fails, everything we've built. I held up a hand. Everything I built is separate. My savings are my own. You know that. And the law supports it. His nostrils flared. You're my wife. And you're my husband, I said. Tell me the truth, Robert. The real truth. How long has your company been failing? He hesitated. Too long. Far too long. Finally, he whispered, 3 years. And you didn't tell me. I didn't want to scare you. You didn't want to be accountable, I corrected. He swallowed hard. I can fix this. But I need your help. No, Robert. What you need is honesty. He exhaled shakily, looking suddenly old. Vulnerable. And yet. Not remorseful. Just afraid. And fear without humility is a dangerous combination. I took a slow breath. I'm not giving you the money. His expression twisted, not into sadness, but anger. So that's it? You'd let me lose everything? No, I said. You lost everything when you chose deception over partnership. For the first time, he realized I meant it. His voice dropped to a cold whisper. You'll regret this. I didn't move. Didn't flinch. Didn't let him see the sting of his words. Because revenge, ethical revenge, isn't fueled by rage. It's fueled by truth. And I had all the truth I needed. That night, I made a decision, one that would turn the tide completely, and Robert would never see it coming. The next morning, I asked Robert to sit down with me in the living room. Sunlight streamed through the windows, making the dust in the air glow like floating embers. It felt almost ceremonial. He sat across from me with his arms crossed, defensive from the start. Is this another interrogation? No, I said. This is clarity. I laid out the folders. Every piece of evidence I had compiled over the past 2 weeks. Bank statements. IRS notices. Emails with his partner. Debt schedules. His real financials, not the edited versions. He stared at them with widening eyes. You went through everything, he whispered. Yes, I said. Because you involved me. And I refuse to be dragged into legal or financial ruin by someone who cannot tell the truth. He opened his mouth, but I spoke first. I'm not giving you the money, Robert. Not a dollar. And you need to hear, calmly, clearly, why. His cheeks reddened. Eleanor. No interruptions, I said gently but firmly. You asked me to listen for years. Now it's your turn. I could see the conflict on his face, anger warring with the shock of being confronted by the calmness he had always underestimated in me. I continued. You have lied about your financial situation for 3 years. You hid debts. Ignored taxes. Misled partners. And you planned, very deliberately, to use my savings without giving me the truth. He looked away. Your business is insolvent, Robert. It is not a bridge crisis. It is a collapse. and pouring my retirement into it would not save it. It would only bury us both. He swallowed hard. His voice trembled. I didn't want to disappoint you. You already did, I said softly. But disappointment isn't fatal. Deception is. For a moment, he looked small. Not the charismatic man clients adored. Not the confident husband who dismissed money as trivial. Just a man who had built a life on hope instead of math, and was now stunned that the math won. What do you want from me? He whispered. The truth, I said. The full truth. And a plan that doesn't involve me lying to myself for your sake. I watched the realization cross his face. He was not losing my money. He was losing control. He leaned back, defeated. The company is done, isn't it? Yes, I said. But you aren't. You can rebuild. You can recover. But only if you accept reality. He closed his eyes. And, I added, you need to tell your partner you will not be using my funds. I've already drafted a message for you. His eyes snapped open. You drafted? Yes, I said. A clear, factual statement informing him that I am not a party to your business obligations, and that any further attempts to involve my assets without consent will result in legal action. His face paled. Legal action? Against Cal? Against anyone who attempts to coerce or manipulate me financially, I said, tone steady. Including you. Silence. Heavy. Final. Then something shifted in him, something I had not expected. His shoulders sagged. His expression softened. He looked tired. Not angry. Not indignant. Just, human. You're right, he whispered. I've been lying to myself for years. And that, I said gently, is where recovery begins. For the first time, he didn't argue. For the first time, he listened. But consequences have a life of their own, and the next day, Robert's business partner showed up at our house, furious, demanding answers, and threatening far more than I expected. Cal arrived mid-morning, unannounced, pounding on the door like a man who believed entitlement was a personality trait. Robert answered while I stood in the hallway, unseen but listening. What the hell is this? Cal shouted, waving the printed message I had drafted. Robert's voice was cautious. It's the truth. You're telling me you're not using her savings? After everything we discussed? That's correct. Cal's tone sharpened like snapped metal. You told me she was on board. I was wrong, Robert said quietly. She's not helping. Cal scoffed. So what, you're choosing her over the company? The word her carried contempt I felt in my bones. I stepped into view. He's choosing legality, Cal, something you might want to familiarize yourself with. Cal turned, startled. Mrs. Price. I didn't realize you were. Listening? I said. Yes. And fully aware. And not a silent participant in my own life. He swallowed, then tried a conciliatory tone. Look, we only need a temporary. Stop, I said. I've reviewed your financials. His eyes widened. Robert stiffened. I continued, calm as stone. Your business is insolvent. The debts exceed reachable revenue. Injecting more capital doesn't save you, it deepens the hole. Cal blinked rapidly. You don't understand. I do, I said. I understand tax liens. I understand ballooning loans. I understand creditor pressure. I understand the risk of criminal implications if you continue taking money under false pretenses. His face blanched. Criminal? Now hold on. Yes, I said. If you present the company as solvent when it is not, and if you accept funds from an uninformed third party under manipulated pretenses, it crosses into fraud. Cal glanced at Robert. You told her everything? No, I said. He didn't. I found it myself. Cal's expression changed then, from bluster to calculation. Look, he said carefully. Maybe we can restructure. Start fresh. Rebuild. We just need time. I shook my head. Time is earned through truth, discipline, and accountability. Not desperation. He exhaled sharply. So that's it? You're letting it die? I'm not letting anything die, I said. I'm preventing an illegal resuscitation. Robert winced. Cal turned to him, rage returning. She just killed the business. No, Robert said quietly. I did. For a moment, no one spoke. Then Cal stepped closer to him, voice low and threatening. You'll regret this. And so will she. I stepped forward before Robert could answer. If you threaten me again, I will involve counsel immediately. And trust me, I document everything. Cal froze. Then, without another word, he stormed out the door, slamming it so hard the sycamores outside shook. The silence that followed felt like the aftermath of a storm. Robert sank onto the couch, burying his face in his hands. I'm so sorry, Ellie. I sat beside him, but not too close. Apology accepted. Accountability expected. He nodded, tears forming. I will make this right. Making it right didn't mean saving the company. It meant shutting it down properly. Honestly. Legally. Over the next month, Robert did exactly that. He contacted creditors. Filed dissolution paperwork. Informed clients. Came clean to his family. Faced every consequence he had long avoided. I stood beside him, not as a rescuer, not as a financier, but as a person who believed in recovery through truth. And slowly, something remarkable happened. He grew. He humbled. He transformed. Not for me. For himself. But the final chapter wasn't about Robert at all, it was about me, and the quiet, powerful choice I made afterward. The business closed. Robert downsized his office. He took on contract consulting work, small projects, honest ones, and paid off debts slowly, methodically, sometimes painfully. But each step was a step forward, not sideways or backward. As for me, I didn't leave him. But I didn't stay silent either. We created a financial boundary agreement, clear, legal, mutual. We met with a counselor. We talked about the years of avoidance, the fear behind the lies, the patterns we had both ignored. And in that process, I discovered something unexpected. Strength isn't always loud. It isn't always dramatic. Sometimes it's a quiet woman in her 60s sitting at her kitchen table, refusing to sacrifice her future to someone else's mistakes. Sometimes strength is simply saying no. My marriage survived, but it changed. We became partners for the first time, not characters performing familiarity. Robert learned humility, and I learned that protecting oneself is not unkind, it is necessary. In the end, my revenge was not destruction. It was truth. It was boundaries. It was forcing a man who had lived behind excuses to finally step into reality. And perhaps the greatest revenge of all was that he respected me more after it happened. I often sit on the porch now, watching the evening light settle over our quiet street, feeling something I didn't feel before. Safety. Not because my finances are intact. But because my voice is intact. I hope my story reminds people, especially women my age, that loyalty does not require self-sacrifice. That love does not mean financing someone else's denial. That boundaries are not walls, they are doorways to healthier lives. And I hope it reminds anyone listening that truth, even when painful, is the most compassionate form of justice. If you were in my shoes, faced with a partner hiding their financial collapse, what would you have done? I'd like to hear your thoughts.